Well, thanks for showing up, everybody. Let's do our best to settle into a helpful posture for the meditation time. And it's good to do this in a fresh way. So, as if for the first time, we listen to the body, we tune in, and out of that tender, caring attitude, we make adjustments, cultivating a stable, comfortable posture that supports alertness. That sense of being right in the middle or non-denial. We're not trying to get somewhere. Instead, we're cultivating a very real, a very honest, a very tender presence with the way it is now, here, this activity of the body and the mind. And again, as if in this fresh way, like what does it mean to open to the way it is? And not just in terms of one moment, but that sustaining, that continuity of present moment awareness. So we're allowing the activity of the body and the mind to simply express themselves here in the space of the present moment. We're neither for nor against the different experiences of body and mind that are coming and going. Some people call this that marriage of intimacy and non-attachment. But what we discover, and it's such an important insight or discovery, that what we mean by being mindfully aware, being present in this wise way, it has to be fresh in every moment. So it can't be some stance that our mind has taken, this idea that I'm being present. There's something deeply humbling about the practice. There's no way to own anything, to have anything. So even when we train with a meditation object, like being present with the physicality of breathing in and breathing out, it has this fresh quality. This little miracle of being present is being renewed moment by moment by moment, where there's that sense of intimacy and that sense of non-attachment, or allowing the experience to be what it is. And this is the same whether there's some distraction that then is recognized as something being known, or being with the primary meditation object. And this freshness that I'm talking about, it's really the quality of wholesome interest. And it has that flavor of humility. If we think we know the way it is or what's happening, then we lose the interest. So in that simple way, even for just the duration of breathing in, or just for the duration of one breath being breathed out, just see if you can sustain that marriage of intimacy, this really pure interest, and the non-attachment, the not clinging to any agenda, trying to get somewhere or fix something. There's already the taste of freedom in letting nature be nature, the nature of breathing in, the nature of breathing out, the nature of thoughts arising and passing. And even old habits of resistance or judgment, judging, whatever the old habits might be, can be experienced in this fresh way. This marriage of intimacy and non-attachment. So remember, it isn't about the breath being special. What's really helpful or special is the continuity of present moment awareness, this coming together of interest, intimacy, and the heart that's allowing things to be what they are, this non-attachment. And so the breath is just simply a training ground to practice being intimate and just allowing the breath to be what it is, non-attachment. And remember, we can just do this one half breath at a time. And let's take a little time and adjust the body, stretch a little bit. Good time to check out the community who shows up on Tuesday evenings. And of course, it makes sense to me that you may not always want your video on, but it's nice for at least a few minutes, if it's okay with you, to turn your video on just to show your face and then do whatever feels appropriate. Feel free to turn it off. We have to find ways to make our virtual community feel supportive. There's something about being together in person that's really supportive, but it's also a great convenience to be able to meet online like this. But it's a little too easy to be anonymous, and there's something about that sense of responsibility to the group that's really helpful. That we're in this together, and even in a bigger sense, part of the lineage of people from the time of the Buddha on. So for so many generations who've been interested in these teachings, all of us with our complicated lives, being human beings, and all that entails, and drawing support from the fact that we're not alone. That other people are going against the stream in a sense. So instead of the cultural stream of distractedness and superficiality, we're realizing the limitations of that and trying to go a different direction. Like I mentioned in the guided sit, this marriage of intimacy and non-attachment, it's so radical. I was rereading recently this passage from Joko Beck's book, Nothing Special is the name of the book, and she has a section. And then, by the way, it's in the document that I have a link for, and I just put it into the chat for everyone. And you'll see that section in the book, Nothing Special, that's titled The Promise That's Never Kept. And it's Joko Beck, this Zen teacher who died about 10 years ago, talking about our relationship with sense experience, or you could say more generally, our relationship with existence as a promise that's never kept. We keep expecting, it's kind of a childlike view of life, totally understandable. And in that, we expect life or some experience to save us, to give us the satisfaction, the happiness that we think we seek. And it's kind of useful to look at our life and to look at the lives of our friends and family and just watch that activity, sense that activity of seeking something to make me happy, seeking something to make me safe, seeking something to satisfy me. And the relevant question is, how has that worked for us? And has this heart, this mind found something that's truly satisfying? So let me just read a couple paragraphs from this chapter. Joko Beck writes, "The problem is that nothing actually works." And this isn't a negative view of life. It's kind of a pragmatic. It's just understanding that life doesn't work. Having a body doesn't work. Having a conditioned mind doesn't work. Doesn't mean we don't experience pleasure, but it doesn't really deliver that satisfaction that we really want. We begin to discover, she writes, that the promise we hold out to ourselves that somehow, somewhere, our thirst will be quenched is never kept. I don't mean that we never enjoy life. Much in life can be greatly enjoyed. certain relationships, certain work, certain activities. But what we want is something absolute. We want to quench our thirst permanently so that we have all the water we want all the time. That promise of complete satisfaction is never kept. It can't be kept. The minute we get something we have desired, we are momentarily satisfied. Then our dissatisfaction rises again. If we've been trying for years to attach our hose to this or that faucet, and each time we discovered that it wasn't enough, there will come a moment of profound discouragement. We begin to sense that the problem is not with our failure to connect with something out there, right? It's not about the experiences that I'm having. We begin to sense that the problem is not with our failure to connect with something out there, but that nothing external can ever satisfy our thirst. This is when we are more likely to begin a serious practice. This can be an awful moment to realize that nothing is ever going to satisfy. Perhaps we have a good job, a good relationship or family, and yet still thirsty. And it dawns on us that nothing really can fulfill our demands. We may even realize that changing our life, rearranging the furniture, isn't going to work either. That moment of despair is, in fact, a blessing, a real beginning. Yeah, I often talk about this as getting a sense, an honest sense of what my mind, what my heart is in allegiance to. You know, who do I look towards as a refuge? Having a good meal, getting a good night's sleep, having a body that's comfortable. And so we seek these things. It's totally natural to be seeking these things. But the problem isn't so much that we want a good sleep or we want a good meal or we want a good relationship or a satisfying job or whatever it is that we want. The problem is that we imagine that this seeking, that gratifying these desires is going to give me something, it's going to give somebody something that will quench that thirst, that will provide that permanent satisfaction. And we're just growing up, basically. You know, part of it is the spiritual maturing, where we realize that that's kind of an idealistic or romantic notion. And here's the important piece. It's actually the cause of so much existential uneasiness. So what actually burdens my heart is seeking satisfaction from things that can't actually satisfy. The problem isn't that all the things in the world don't satisfy my heart permanently in a lasting way. The problem is thinking that they should. That kind of hunger or that expectation. And it's kind of shapes how we look at sense experience, how we look at a relationship with another person, how we look at a home, how we look at a job or status, how we look at what's going on in the wider world, like the results of the election. You know, we expect, oh, this will save me, you know, if the election goes this way or that way. You know, and it's like, does it? Those of you who are happy with the results, is it saving you in some kind of lasting or permanent way? No, it doesn't. There's something built in, you know, when it's really useful to reflect on what the Buddha means by that word dukkha, which gets translated as suffering, be a better translation to translate it as unsatisfactoriness. There's just something about the nature of existence, being a human being, having a body and a mind, having a life. There's something about it that just doesn't work. And the word dukkha evidently comes from an axle that's out of true or a wheel that isn't round. it doesn't really work well. It's always going to be clunky. And the Buddha uses that word, it's a central part of the teachings that there is this truth of dukkha, that experience doesn't satisfy in a permanent way. And yet we keep looking for that. And that creates the existential uneasiness that we're all dealing with. Experience, the unfolding of our lives. The Buddha describes it in this way, the 8 worldly winds, where there's gain and there's loss and there's praise and there's blame and there's pleasure and pain and fame and disrepute. So it's just this unfolding, none of which is permanent, right? It's all becoming the next thing, whatever it is. We get sick and then we get better, or we get better and then we get sick. Or people like us and then they don't like us. Or I like myself and then I don't like myself. We don't get to the end point. There is no end point where everything's wrapped up in a nice little package, the bow Mark, and it's just how Mark wants it. And everything is locked down, isn't going to change. I mean, that would be its own hell realm, actually. You know, if what I imagine I want, and then I got that, and it never changed, that would be its own. It would be like an episode from Twilight Zone. Those of you who remember that program, and just that's its own horror. So this is a very powerful teaching, this promise that's not kept, because it points to a real change in allegiance from expecting something from our sense existence. And the switch isn't to rejecting sense existence or sense experience. It's rejecting the dependence or rejecting the promise that the purpose is to make me happy. It's like a relationship with another person would never go well if you were really honest with them and you said, hey, do you want to be in relationship with me? And if the person is interested, you say, well, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for you to make me happy. It's it's a real setup. That's not going to work. Or, we show up for an interview with the job and we say to the person interviewing us, yeah, I'm looking for a job. I want the job to make me happy. Or whatever we might, we say to the restaurant, the person, well, yeah, I want this meal to make me happy in some kind of lasting, permanent way. We'd all, if we say it out loud, we realize, well, that's not, that expectation is just not appropriate, because we all know, a person is not going to make me happy. And that to dump that on another person, oh, I'm going to have kids because they'll make me happy, or I'll get a dog because it will make me, well, that's a lot of pressure on the dog, to have to make us happy, or the weather, or whatever it is. This is from an article that Ayakema, this wonderful German woman, Buddhist nun, she died in, I think, 1997, so a while back. But one of the first Western women to ordain and became a very well-known, respected teacher here in the West. There's several good books you can get by Ayakema. That's her monastic name. And this is an article on satisfaction. And I think I linked to this in the Google Doc. There's a link for this article that you can read if you want. It's just a paragraph. To look for total satisfaction in oneself is a futile endeavor. Neither satisfaction nor self really exist. And I'd probably add to this, really exist as we imagine that they exist. And she continues writing, since everything changes from moment to moment, where can self and where can satisfaction be found? Yet these are two things that the whole world is looking for. And it sounds quite reasonable, doesn't it? But since these are impossible to find, everybody is unhappy. Not necessarily because of tragedies or poverty, sickness, or death, simply because of unfulfilled desire. Everybody is looking for something that isn't available, right? We're looking for satisfaction in a kind of more lasting, permanent sense in a way that just is not available, does not exist in the way we imagine it exists. And she writes, it's worse than looking for a needle in a haystack. At least the needle is there, even though it's hard to find. But satisfaction and self are both delusions. So how can they ever be found? Searching here and there keeps everyone busy on this little globe of ours. If we were to stop looking for satisfaction for the self, we would have an immediate lessening of dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, since dukkha arises only from wanting something. Yeah, what a turn, isn't that? Now, just keep our mind, keep our heart open to this possibility. And I'll just restate it in my own words, that the cause for suffering, the cause for stress, the cause for this pervasive uneasiness, unsatisfactoriness, is that there's a sense of a me looking for satisfaction, which feels so justifiable. Of course I'm looking for satisfaction. What else would I do with my life, right? But it's that wrong idea that there's me looking toward experience to be satisfied with that creates the anxiety, the uneasiness, the fear, the hate, the greed, all of the toxic, heavy qualities that are sort of reverberating in our world, in our hearts, in our world, come from this, what in Buddhism we'd call wrong idea or wrong view. And we want to stay open. We want to actually check that out. Like whenever, just a way to work with this is whenever we're suffering, instead of to try to get what we want in order to make the suffering go away, to just get interested, like this point that the Buddha and Ayakema is making, that the dissatisfaction, the dukkha, the suffering that I'm experiencing is because there's a sense of a somebody who wants something that they expect will make this suffering go away. I'm looking for something to make this go away, even though that attitude is often what gets us into the Buddhist teachings and practices, right? This is what brings us to a place like Common Ground or some place to learn about these teachings is I'm a somebody who's looking for satisfaction, or somebody who's looking to feel better in some kind of lasting, permanent way. But the more we explore that, we realize the limitations. This is from chapter 30. This is another thing I linked to in the document. Some of we've been looking at Ajahn Chah's book, The Collected Teachings of Ajahn Chah. He's a very famous Thai meditation teacher and Buddhist monk who died in the 90s as well. And this is a great collection of his teachings. And chapter 30 is this chapter, The Place of Coolness. So I'm going to read a few things from that chapter. He writes there, he didn't write it, this is just a transcription of a Dharma talk he gave to some people at his monastery in northeast Thailand. The practice of Dhamma goes against our habits. The truth goes against our desires. So there is difficulty in the practice. Some things which we understand as wrong may be right, while the things we take to be right may be wrong. Why is this? Because our minds are in darkness. We don't clearly see the truth of the way it is. We don't really know anything, so we're fooled by people's lies. They point out what is right as being wrong, and we believe it. That which is wrong they say is right, and we believe that. This is because we are not yet our own masters. Our moods lie to us constantly. We shouldn't take this mind and its opinions as our guide because it doesn't know the truth. And then he gives this, Ajahn Chah gives this really powerful, I really like this simile. Some of you might know the skin disease that some animals get, like bears get it and coyotes, and it's called, dogs can get it too. Mange, I think it's pronounced Mange. And it's like you get small mites that dig into your skin and really create a lot of itching. And so he gives a simile of a dog that has mange. And he says, standing it suffered, running it suffered, sitting it suffered, lying down it suffered, in the underbrush, a tree hollow, or a cave it suffered. It blamed standing for its discomfort. It blamed sitting for its discomfort. It blamed running. It blamed lying down. It blamed the tree. It blamed the underbrush. It blamed the cave. In fact, the problem was with none of those things. That jackal had mange. The problem was with the mange, right? And this is like the restlessness in our own hearts. You know, we think, oh, it's too cold. That's why I'm uneasy, or I have these sensations in my body, or we keep thinking we know the problem and we seek to correct it. You know, if only I had somebody in my life, or oh, if only I were single, or if only I had more money, or if only the money I have was more secure, or if only I wasn't going gray, if only I'd lost some weight, or if only I were in better shape, if only election had gone another way. We always had that. That's the promise that isn't kept. And it creates a kind of restlessness. And, you know, even when we do experience some deeper calm and tranquility, we're getting a nice massage, or we're comfortable in bed, how long does that last? And even then, you know, we we want it to last. We ruin it by wanting it to last. Even when things are really nice, we're scheming about locking it in some way, as if I can really own this. You know, the standing joke in Buddhist circles is, you know, we really, you know, having a stressful life, we really want to have a Buddhist retreat. And finally we get on retreat and we find our mind obsessing about the next Buddhist retreat. Or a more mundane example of that is like working really hard to get to our vacation, and on vacation we're just obsessing about other vacations that we should take, or having a delicious meal and thinking about other foods that I like to eat. I see this all the time in my mind. I'm eating a meal that I'm really enjoying and I'm thinking about the next helping. You know, it's like that kind of in Buddhism we have this image of a hungry ghost, you know, that just is can't ever kind of uh, satisfy their appetite, and not appreciating the possibility of contentment with what we have. Doesn't mean that we don't understand that, you know, when we're cold, it's nice to put a sweater on or turn the thermostat up. It just means we understand the value of contentment. And that contentment isn't a matter, it's kind of like a choice as opposed to needing particular conditions. This is why I think some people really learn a lot from traveling. You know, they'll go to places or just having different relationships with people with different life experiences, and they see people who have things um, that they always thought they wanted, and realize that, oh boy, they're not happy at all, you know? But yet they got the car that I've wanted for so long, you know, or they've got the money in the bank that I really thought, or they've got a beautiful body, or they have, you know, whatever kind of intelligence that I thought. But yet, and then on the other hand, we run into people who don't have things that we just are sure that I need to be happy, and they seem happy. They're content. They seem so much more at ease than me, and yet they have so much less than I have. especially they have less of that which I think is absolutely needed in order to be happy. And it just throws our mind for a loop. How can that be? Ajahn Chah says here, we practitioners are just the same as that jackal. Our discontent is due to wrong view. Because we don't exercise sense restraint, we blame our suffering on externals. Wherever we live, we aren't satisfied. And he lists all these different places, the different monasteries that the monks could go to. And then he asks, why not? Because we still have wrong view within us. Wherever we go, we aren't content, right? Because wherever we go, we're bringing wrong view. And the wrong view here is this wrong understanding of sense experience. We have this idea deeply embedded, so embedded we don't even think of it as an idea or a point of view. But we have this deeply embedded idea that sense experience is here to satisfy us. And it's just a matter of me engaging my circumstance to gather the sense experiences that will, in fact, give me satisfaction. But when has anybody gotten to the place where they're done doing that? Never. It's so interesting, like when you do a deep relaxation, to get to that point where you don't want to do it anymore. You finally get to lie down. And it's so sweet initially for how many minutes? And then you got to kind of turn, oh, let me lie on my side. Or now I'm a little warm, I'll take the blankets off. Or I'm a little cold, to put, and pretty soon it's like torture. If we had to stay there longer than we wanted, it would become a kind of torture. And that's true with any sense experience. If we just kept getting the same and the same and the same, I really want spaghetti and meatballs. But how long do you want spaghetti and meatballs before it becomes torture? Or even watching a funny program, a funny TV show, And at some point, you just don't want to watch it anymore. And if you were forced to keep watching it, it would really become unpleasant. So what is left then if my life, so it's really good to personalize this in terms of our own subjective situation as a human being with a life, a mind and body, the unfolding of our experience one moment after another. And if the point for me isn't to sort of get comfortable, get what I want, avoid what I don't want, what am I to do with this life? What is actually going to be giving the heart what it really wants? If it isn't approaching my life from the point of view that there's me who's looking for an experience that will provide satisfaction. If that's not the perspective that I live with, what perspective might we live with? And Ajahn Chah gives this example, like he's sort of lamenting how difficult it is to be a Buddhist teacher, because he says, I'll tell people, but they just don't listen. And he gives the example of a maggot, and let's say it's in some poop, and it's very happy in the poop. And even if somebody seemingly out of compassion said, here, let me liberate you from the poop, and very carefully took a stick and got the maggot out of the dung or out of the whatever cow pie and moved it away, the maggot would just crawl back to the poop, right? Because that's the nature. And he goes, Ajahn Chah said, we run back to our lump of dung because that's where we feel at home. We're all like this. If we don't see the harmful consequences of all of our wrong views, then we can't leave them. The practice is difficult, so we should listen. There is nothing else to practice. So that's part of our work is, as we're living and we watch ourselves, when we go to the internet to look for something interesting to satisfy us, or we go to the refrigerator, or we, go hang out with a friend or with our partner, then we want to just be honest. Not, we don't even have to talk about it. It's not so much we talk about it, but we're just observing this attitude in the mind, this perspective in the mind. I'm a somebody who's going over here, going to do this thing here in order to get something that will give me satisfaction, right? So it's a kind of greed. And of course, it comes with fear, like, well, maybe it won't, you know. So there's all this sort of uneasiness. And there's just enough experience of gratification that we get confused by that temporary gratification that we do get with some sense experiences, right? I mean, the Buddha was very clear. There is obviously the experience of gratification. When I'm really tired and I rest, it feels good. When I'm really hungry and I have something to eat that I like, that feels really good for a while. When I'm lonely and then I have someone to hang out with, that feels good for a while until it doesn't. And strangely, we've learned to almost like an addiction to that intensity, even though the promise keeps failing us in the sense of it doesn't provide lasting happiness, it doesn't provide lasting satisfaction. There's something about the intensity of seeking, the hopefulness, and the fear of not doing it, the fear of just giving up because we don't know what else to do, that it just kind of keeps us in the game, even though we're, in a sense, constantly or repeatedly disappointed. Here's Ajahn Chah a little bit more from that article, The Place of Coolness. So even though you may be unhappy, it doesn't matter. That unhappiness is uncertain. Is that unhappiness yourself? Is there any substance to it? Is it real? I don't see it as being real at all. Unhappiness is merely a flash of feeling which appears and then is gone. Happiness is the same. Is there consistency to happiness? Is it truly an entity? Is it simply a feeling that flashes suddenly and it's gone? There, it's born and then it dies. Love just flashes up for a moment and then disappears. Where is the consistency in love or hate or resentment? In truth, there is no substantial entity there. They are merely impressions which flare up in the mind and then die. They deceive us constantly. We find no certainty anywhere. Just as the Buddha said, when unhappiness arises, it stays for a while, then disappears. When unhappiness disappears, happiness arises and lingers for a while and then dies. When happiness disappears, unhappiness arises again, on and on like this. And this is sort of, imagine if we had a really good editor and they were somehow able to access our memory and they just kind of created this very well edited display of all of the moments of happiness and all of the moments of unhappiness in our lives from the time we were, an infant to present day. And just like flashing, oh yeah, there's that moment. Because we've had a lot of moments of happiness, probably most of us. And probably we've had a lot of moments of unhappiness. And where has all of that led us right now? Like what is the what is that what has that resulted in right now? What all those moments of happiness has given us what right now? What's the result of all that? Or all those moments of unhappiness, And that's what the Buddha means. That's what Ajahn Chah means by the ephemeral nature of the experience of happiness and unhappiness. He's not saying it's unreal. He's just saying it's not substantial. I mean, some of us have had moments of like a lot of happiness, real ecstatic joy, and we're just not interested enough to sort of track that in that kind of balanced way. Okay, we're really, really happy, really, really happy, kind of happy. And then how many minutes, moments until it's same old, same old? Same with really terrible things that have happened. It's just so amazing with my own kind of medical crisis. I'm mostly out of the woods, but there's still a lot of reverberations and, just constant medical stuff that I got to deal with. Besides the fact that I can't really be around people without a mask on, um, because my immune system is being suppressed. But all that becomes so normal after a while. Like I could whip up a drama, about some oh poor me, sort of, oh, why me? Or this is a pain in the butt. I hate this. But it's like it's such a burden to stay angry at my particular situation. Every once in a while when things are just right, it kind of there will be a moment of going like, but very quickly, wisdom and awareness sees like, well, why get angry? It doesn't help. It doesn't make the conditions differently. They're different than they are, right? And the same thing with happiness. It's sort of like when things are really nice and there's that tendency to want to lock onto it, like own it in some way. If there's any wisdom and awareness, we just see, well, that just ruins whatever happiness there is. It just gets ruined by trying to hold on to it. And Ajahn Chah, in the same chapter, The Place of Coolness, he uses that simile that I've been using recently of the log floating down the river, right? Just following the natural currents of the river. And on one side of the river, let's call it the right bank of the river, is happiness. And on the left bank of the river is unhappiness. And the job is not to get entangled, not to be confused by rubbing up against happiness or unhappiness, not to imagine that the actual experience of happiness is more than what it is. It is just like Ajahn Chah says, that flash. It's something. We're not saying that it isn't something, but it isn't something that somebody gets to own in a way that's meaningful in that self-centered way. Nobody owns anything. Like all of those experiences of happiness that you've had in your life, is there a you that owns them, has them tucked away in a bank somewhere? No. I mean, we can have a memory, we can regenerate the memory of something, and the memory might have some pleasure to it. We might get a little bit of the flavor of the gratification. But if I get dependent on that, like if my mind keeps revisiting a happy moment, eventually it's unpleasant, isn't it? It's like I'm trying to extract something from a memory and I can't squeeze anything more out of it. And the need to squeeze something more out of it is actually stressful and unpleasant. I'm actually suffering because I have a pleasant memory, but I want something from it. And I can't really get what I want from that pleasant memory. Have you ever caught your mind in this place where you're really trying to get something from a pleasant memory? You know it's pleasant. You know, in a kind of that relative sense, that this happened to me and it was good. But what you want in that moment is you want somebody to get something from that memory, and that won't happen. And when we're really honest, it's kind of an awakening experience. Like it's not pleasant, but it's really useful to realize that memory can't really give me what I think the me wants, the I wants. This was a sutta from the Buddha, the Buddhist teachings, that gets translated the title as the thorn in your heart. And I love this opening line: fear is born from arming oneself. We think fear is there because things are scary, but it's actually, the problem isn't that things are uncertain or that my life is vulnerable or insecure. The problem is that we think we should arm ourselves, protect ourselves, that there's somebody that needs to be protected from vulnerability, uncertainty, insecurity. That's the cause for fear. Not that things are changing or that they're uncertain, but that I'm certain there's a me that doesn't like the uncertainty, the insecurity, the vulnerability. That's unquestioned. And so we just continue in a kind of arrogant sense. So anyway, the Buddha says, fear is born from arming oneself. Just see how many people fight. I tell you about the dreadful fear that caused me to shake all over. Now, isn't it nice that the Buddha, just in this very personal way, sharing, when he was a practitioner, just seeing things as they are really shook him. Okay? That caused me to shake all over. Seeing creatures flopping around like fish in water too shallow, so hostile to one another, right? So, I mean, this is not a bad description, like looking at the world around us and describing it as a bunch of fish in water too shallow, desperate, right? To get back in the deep water, so hostile to one another. Seeing this, I became afraid. This world completely lacks essence. It trembles in all directions. I long to find a place. I long to find myself a place unscathed, but I could not see it. Seeing people locked in conflict, I became completely distraught. So it's like getting to the end of the rope, right? Which can be very useful spiritually, not pleasant, but basically realizing that all my strategies to be happy don't deliver. All my strategies to be safe don't deliver perfect security. And we can either freak out or we can get curious in that moment. And the Buddha got curious in that moment, so he describes it this way. But then I discerned here a thorn hard to see, lodged deep in the heart. It's only when pierced by this thorn that one runs in all directions. So if that thorn is taken out, one does not run and settles down. So I'm assuming that some of you have a sense of what the Buddha means by that thorn deep in the heart, right? That's wrong view. That's that self-centered view, that self that thinks that some sense experience is going to take care of my existential uneasiness once and for all. And there's just a little bit more here I want to read. Who here has crossed over desires, the world's bond, so hard to get past? One does not grieve, one does not mourn, one's stream is cut, one is all unbound. What went before, let go of that. All that's to come, have none of it. Don't hold on to what's in between, and you'll wander fully at peace. For whom there is no eye-making, all throughout the body and mind, and who grieves not for what is not, is undefeated in the world. For whom there is no this is mine, nor anything like that is theirs, not finding selfness, one does not grieve at I have nothing. I also linked to that sutta in the document too, in case you're interested in having your own copy of that. So let me open this up for discussion. Just this possibility of the heart, what the heart really wants is the release from the heaviness, the stickiness, the anxiety, um, the squeeze. And what we've been doing to deal with that existential uneasiness, the Buddha suggests, is the cause. So that would be interesting for people to share your own experience, how you saw that what was really heavy in your heart, hard to bear in your heart, really was related to your attitude and where you were looking for happiness. And this is actually just last story, but what motivated the Buddha to teach after his own awakening, because initially he thought, well, I mean, at least as the stories go, he thought, well, this is just way too subtle. No one's going to get it. But then he was just reflecting, on people like himself who want to be happy, but do exactly what leads to this existential anxiety. In pursuit of happiness, they create uneasiness. And that broke his heart open. Well, maybe some people will get it. And he started teaching, for 45 years. He taught before he died. And we're, so many centuries later, the beneficiaries of that. So, yeah, what comes to mind, your own questions and your own experiences in the practice that seem relevant to share or you're willing to share the group? You could just go ahead and unmute yourselves. And it's always nice to share your first name, and feel free to also share your pronouns if that would be helpful. Anybody feel like getting the conversation started?
I'm Sean. I can share something.
Yeah, please.
Um, yeah, an experience just from my personal life that's coming to mind is I went through a breakup about 6 weeks ago, or over the course of the summer. And even the example you gave earlier on about if we speak out plainly out loud, I'm expecting this person to make me happy or fulfill, I expect this job to make me happy or whatever. We can see that it's absurd. But those are running so deeply, the program so deeply. And this relationship I was in was, I would have to say, the most awake one I've ever been in, with two people that are dedicated to discovering, both dedicated to discovering truth of our experience. And even that, like, I thought that we would make it, that it would be enough, that we were showing up for all the difficulties. But what was underneath all of that was this grasping for dear life. A part of me really believed that I needed this person to fulfill something in me to be okay. And um, it was extreme. It was like it was the deepest heartbreak I've ever felt, maybe because I was actually feeling it for the first time. Felt heartbreak before, but I was more present for it. And not easy at all. Not easy at all to feel. Um, but on the other side, I'm like, I don't think I can ever behave in the same way again. You know, not that I will never be in relationship. I still have the desire to be in a relationship, but to a part of me that was so locked in that way, like I can't consciously go there again. So that's just something that was feeling resonant for me in my own experience. Thank you.
Yeah, really deep learning there, Sean. I'm so glad you shared that with all of us. Yeah, these lessons are liberating, but can be so painful. But the change is hard, to kind of go beyond the known because it's so reinforced in our culture to have that attitude that, you know, this will save me, this will provide lasting happiness. And just imagine, I mean, even in a kind of a silly way, like when you see some of you have cats or dogs, and you see your dog, to just say, I love you, but I don't expect you to make me happy. And then when you see your partner, I love you, but I don't expect you to make me happy. And you see your meal, I'm going to love this spaghetti, but I don't expect it to make me happy, and you're about to crawl into your bed tonight. I see you, bed, it's going to be nice for a while, but I don't expect you having a good night's sleep is not going to solve the problem in my heart, right? So we have, because it really requires this radical shift where it's not about not engaging sense experience, but it's dropping the expectation that there's somebody who's going to be saved by some sense experience or going to be harmed. Oh no, I can't get sick. Well, why would we set ourselves up in that way? Maybe it's okay to get sick. Maybe it's okay to die. Maybe it's okay to experience loss. Doesn't mean it won't hurt, just on that human level, there will be the pain of loss if we lose a loved one. But maybe that's okay to experience even the most intense kind of pain of loss or whatever else humans have to go through, like realizing that they have cancer or realizing that they've lost their financial security because, their boss doesn't want them to work there anymore. Now, who'd like to go next? Other thoughts, powerful sharings like that last one?
I would
Yeah,
like to share.
yeah, please.
Hi, Mark. Hi, everyone. Um, I had a question that's been coming up in my practice and waiting to. Um, anyways, I'm trying to understand. Uh, the short version of the question is like, you, Mark, did um, you being a facilitator and a teacher that you are, do you use terms you feel like you were destined to become a teacher, um, specifically of the Dharma? It's such a short version. The more context behind that is like I'm trying to understand the difference between um, like a karmic like a karmic responsibility to undo, negative karma that's been built up, like in my case, like throughout my family, and especially with dealing with my family's legacy with violence and incarceration, and I feel like I've been destined to do that, and doing that, becoming an educator, but also being a facilitator of healing. Um, so like but for me to feel like I'm destined to do that, it's like I'm trying to get past seeing how much of that is actually ego saying, oh, that's actually me wanting to, how much of that is like me taking up that space or kind of wanting to see myself working with people in a certain or being viewed in a certain way, and how much of it is actually like a natural inclination to help and like you mentioned with the Buddha, it's like wanting to help people alleviate that suffering or to find a different path. So I hope that made kind of sense. It's like karma versus like destiny or purpose, somewhere along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that Buddha might give an answer like to use the story that we tell ourselves, around destiny, around karma, to use it in a way that's helpful, but not in a way that it's kind of, in a way your question is also about how to use identities, like being male or being BIPOC or being, queer or whatever identities, being well educated or not well. So we have all these different identities and we don't want to get stuck with the identity because part of sensing karma or like it's almost like imperfectly reading a natural process that's unfolding. Our life is unfolding, and we're kind of getting an imperfect sense of the shape and quality and character of that unfolding, right? But we don't want to ever imagine we know all of it because we don't. So it needs to be there needs to be a lot of humility too. Like it seems like this. And isn't it interesting that it seems this way? That this seems to be what my life is about. This seems to be what I'm inclined, that I gravitate toward, what I'm interested in, what I find meaning in, right? So we can understand these sort of things. They don't seem personal, they're real, but it's sort of like I have to kind of own it because it's here and now. This interest of mine or this impulse I have to do this kind of work. But we don't want to lock it in as a fixed truth because that doesn't really fit with the way it is. And there's always like what's unfolding in your life, what's unfolding in my life is still very much alive. And we don't really know all the twists and turns, do we? And we want to kind of keep that in mind. And we can lay heavy trips on ourselves too, like what you were saying about being responsible or like really being interested in facilitating the healing in your family, even in your ancestors who already have passed, maybe even. Um, but is like, what of that story is helpful, like inspires courage, and what of it inspires pride or some kind of unhelpful identity, like we get locked in a way. So just to be really nimble, like I'm using it to bring up qualities that are really useful to help me navigate my life, but not qualities that tend to lock me in and to sort of make things more rigid or more solid than they actually are. Yeah, thanks for the really beautiful question. Well, really great to be with everybody tonight. I wish we had a little bit more time, but of course, we just keep coming back to the Dharma each week. So hope to see you next Tuesday night or somewhere down the road. Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to say good night to everybody.